Welcome to Cactus Crossfire, your go-to for hot takes and prickly debates.
Welcome into another episode. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to Cactus Crossfire. We're here at 8688 Studios here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Across from me, as always, my co-host, Eddie Abelser. Eddie, how you doing and where are you at today?
I'm up in the state of Utah, and it's a little fitting for the issues that we'll be talking about today. But I'm excited that we get to be with the fantastic 8688 Studios, the studios that whistles in 12 language, the studios that when the teachers walk in, they make teachers raise their hands to talk.
There you go,
so
buddy.
We appreciate our fellow studio mates and the work that Mr. Baca does in helping us get this podcast up and running. And thank you, Mandy, for being here as well.
Yeah, our producer, Mandy's here as well. So been an interesting week this week, and it is fitting that you're in Utah. You can give us the perspective of things from there. We're filming this about 5 days after the shooting of Charlie Kirk in Utah. There's 1,000 different narratives that have happened since that moment here in New Mexico. We've seen bomb threats of elected officials. We've seen school lockdowns. We've seen 1,000 different narratives, and we felt that it was important to do this episode. And one of the reasons why, Eddie and I, when we first started talking about coming on and doing a podcast and being talking heads about policy and politics in the West, was so that we could bring a discourse to the conversation that we hadn't been seeing in a long time. One that was based in opinions that were differing, that at the same time were respectful of one another and inviting of differences of opinion in, but in all of that, never being one of the ones to incite the type of language or whistleblower type of a dog whistle language that we've seen from other candidates and elected officials through the country. For myself personally, and I know that Eddie as well, this is not an easy thing to do sometimes when you're in politics, and sometimes when you're elevated to a level of, Eddie was an elected official. I worked very closely with elected officials for a number of years. And in that time, both of us experienced death threats. Both of us experienced, security issues that were troubling to us. I remember being a candidate for the state house here in New Mexico, and people, because when you fill out a campaign candidate form, you have to put your name, your address, your information, and it's all public record. And, people were showing up to my doorstep. I mean, just completely, totally unhinged about who I was or what party I belonged to. And it was scary. It was scary a lot of times. And we both have friends still who are elected officials, even here in New Mexico. We had Salomon Peña, who was convicted a few months back for attempting to assassinate the Speaker of the House and a number of other legislators, actually put together an assassination team to try to do that. So we understand that on a very intimate level. And we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to go through kind of what led up to this shooting, and at the same time, talk about the political rhetoric, the safety around it. And, Eddie's great to have on the team because, he's got that big fancy PhD of being a licensed therapist to help us look at the mental health side of it. So, Eddie?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Sisto, these are tough episodes for me. It's tough to come in here and see what just happened in Utah and remember the experiences that I've went through as an elected, my friends. I tell the story often that early on in my legislative career, my elected officials career, there was a state senator that I served with, and she became a congresswoman from Tucson. And when she became a congresswoman in Tucson, Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords would hold these meet you on your corner, coffee on the corner campaign events. And At her campaign event, she had two individuals that I knew very well. I mean, I knew Gabby, I know Gabby, but Gabe Zimmerman is one, and he actually long time ago volunteered and assisted in my campaign when I first ran. And then Daniel Hernandez, who was an intern there, young man at the time. Forgive me, Daniel. I know you're still a young man compared to me, but both of them were shot. One was killed. Obviously, Gabby survived. I remember being elected and seeing what happened. A lot of people don't know this. When we found out that we were pregnant with our oldest child, we were inspired by the fact that Gabby was still alive. We thought she had been murdered and killed at that event, and she was surviving. And out of respect, one of the things that my wife and I did, we were choosing names, but the name Brielle, sort of Gabrielle, was a tribute to, I think, the experience that we had at that moment in life where we realized she was still alive. I can go on and on. Death threats upon myself. I remember being in a situation where Capitol Police pulled me out and put me in a locked facility to avoid some potential dangers. I remember Tempe Sheriff's Office coming to my house because the FBI had called them because of a death threat that came to our house. I mean, the sickness that's happening in this world around the physical violence upon other individuals because you don't agree with their ideology is just extraordinarily sad. And Sisto, honestly, man, I don't really put up with it. Like, it sort of pisses me off. I don't think we are in a position to placate extreme actors in our society and allow them the same civil rights and civil liberties that we have, who adhere to this social contract. If it is part of being American, that we respect each other gracefully with dignity. Our country was born out of violence. Our country was born out of disagreement. Everyone's very familiar with the very prominent death that was turned into an award-winning play of Alexander Hamilton. But the disagreements that happened between two political individuals and what occurred back then should not be happening today. Mm-hmm. We are in a much more civilized society, in my opinion. We have progressed in such a profound way that the action of violence upon others should never be needed ever again in America.
Well,
and
I mean,
I've got some ideas on that. Yeah,
and that's where this flashpoint of Charlie Kirk comes into play. I mean, I put out a message to folks about my thoughts on the shooting and everything else, and it was filled with kind of that. Not only did we feel empathy for him dying the way he did, but at the same time, we were asking for people to start engaging in a better civil discourse and to start engaging at a different level. And, and the stuff that has circulated on social media since then, there's outrage on both ends of the spectrum, right? And so, what in those two worlds that we saw leading up to this incident, and we're finding out more. They caught the shooter the other day. We're learning more about what was going on with him and where he was at. But a lot of people are saying that it's the rhetoric. It's the rhetoric that's surrounding these talking heads, folks like you and I. I think you and I, Eddie, have had enough of a conversation on being both in the policy space and the governmental space to understand that it is a social contract, as you said, right? We do have a responsibility of being individuals in this space that people are turning to to get information from, but also making people understand that these are our opinions. We want people to go out and we want people to do their own research, to challenge us on when they find things that they may disagree with us, but in a positive way, because violence is never an option. And when does that rhetoric turn into things that just simply offend people?
Yeah. Well, and see, so honestly, man, like, we live in the greatest country in the entire world. We have the ability to accomplish levels of accumulation of wealth and opportunity through hard work, through connection and friendship, through education. Every individual has the opportunity for advanced education, regardless of who you are. In our country, if you're a man or a woman, or identify as something non-binary, if you are gay, straight, lesbian, transsexual, or if you are religious or not religious, or if you are white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, this country affords individuals opportunities at growth and achievement, unlike any other country in the world. Look at what just happened in Nepal. These young people are rebelling, murder in the streets because of the aristocratic class in a country where there's extreme wealth and extreme poverty, not in America. But yet we have young people acting in this country as if there is some sort of extraordinary oppression that's happening to them. We have adults that are behaving like children and treating others with such disrespect and creating disharmony in communities. And honestly, the social media stuff is the one that makes me the saddest. I was on a little debate with someone on one of my social media feeds, telling them, listen, you don't need to post quotes about what Charlie Kirk said in his history when I talked about how sad and awful the event of his death was. Those two things don't matter. You can go in my history, Sisto, and take a look at some stupid, crazy stuff that I have said.
Yeah.
That I'm embarrassed about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. Those two things don't equal.
Yeah.
But yet people are acting in this country like there's some sort of extraordinary oppression that they don't have the opportunity to achieve. Now, maybe the levels are different. That's something that we get into about policy. But that is not something to take arms and murder someone in cold blood, broadcast for the whole world to see.
And that's where, we've moved away from having just, 3 networks or 5 networks where we were getting information from, in our local papers and our, New Mexico, we used to have the Albuquerque Tribune. Now we only have the Albuquerque Journal. Local media has taken a big stumble and a fall, but also because it went to this digital age. But everybody has an opportunity to become an authority on something. And when you see, and I'm guilty of it, just like, people on the left and people on the far left and the people on the far right, of, choosing what I want to bring into my space and choosing what information I want, what sources I want to trust. You're right, Eddie. You see memes, you see all this stuff getting posted all the time. And the funny part is there is no fact check. Right? There is no fact check. You have to become the fact check. And a lot of the times, I'll go on to, somebody will post a story and say, this is what's happened, and this is what the radical left is doing, and this is what the radical right is doing. And then I look it up, and it's just some independent blogger that's paid for by the far left or the far right, and they put that information out there. Yeah, or a bot.
Right, or a bot paid for by another country.
And that's one of the arguments that people are coming up with now with Charlie Kirk. How did he blow up? How did he get to be where he was? He was financed by, far right organizations that liked what he was saying, and they liked where he was going. Now, the interesting part about it has been, and I was talking with Mandy about this before we did this program, was, I was never a guy to tune into to Charlie Kirk. I don't tune into Joe Rogan. I don't tune in to certain people. It took me a long time to even tune in to listen to Howard Stern. Okay. And the reason being is because I didn't like the way that they incited people. I didn't like how they were going for the quick gotcha, where they were going to try to get more views and to try to get more people to watch their stuff, because it said, the big story was going to be, did you see what so-and-so said? And when we started this program, when we started doing this, a big part of it was that we weren't going to be those guys, right? We're going to try to be entertaining for everybody, and that's something good. But at the same time, are we going to try to incite people? We're going to try to incite people for one thing and one thing only, for them to learn how to get more educated about issues, to do their own research, to take our opinions, because we've become trusted sources with people in our respective communities, and walk away feeling like you learned something more than when you first came into the show. And right now, where we're at with this whole political discourse is that we have people who right now in America, and you're right, Eddie, I mean, there's people in America who have these feelings and these senses of what's going on. But, I can't help but think that a lot of these folks that have escalated to this level, is the rhetoric is part of it, but the other part of it is mental health, right? And
100%.
And you and your background as a mental health guy, how does this happen? Like, how is it that people don't recognize? Because you always see this, and you're even seeing this in this story here with Charlie Kirk. You're seeing the family start saying things like, "Well, he became more political in the last couple of weeks. He became, this happened with that shooter," and you hear that in all of these stories. Somebody has seen something, but nobody stopped and said, "Wait a minute. Slow down. What's going on? How can I help you?" So when people start seeing that from their friends and family, what should they be doing, Eddie? I mean, I have no clue.
Well, let's start with the real problem. We talk about everyone. I mean, listen, I've been very critical of my Democratic allies and friends. Stop talking about just gun control. That is the dumbest thing, to narrow a pigeonhole into a policy discussion about why violence is happening in America, and it's simply gun control. That's baloney, right? This comes down to the fact that we are in a country where we have the biggest epidemic of illness that is untreated, unobserved, or poorly treated in many of our, in every aspect of society, and that's mental illness, serious mental illness as well. So you take the fact that the brain is this very complex organ that is firing on multiple levels. The synaptic modules are creating, this electricity that is bringing ideas and thoughts and chemicals to the brain. And you have chemicals like cortisol and dopamine and serotonin. And sometimes there's too much serotonin and too much dopamine that sends someone into a manic fit. Or sometimes there's cortisol that overwhelms an individual and they become depressed, right? Our body is complex. Mm-hmm. And unattended and unsupported, the body does what it needs to do for survival.
Yeah.
But if the brain is thinking that something exists that isn't there, delusion, right? And that this delusion becomes the obsession of an individual, and it is reiterated over and over and over again, that delusion is now that individual's reality. So let's play this out a little bit, Sisto, right? Let's call it like white young men. Mm-hmm. We have a problem around white young men. And what I want to talk about, where psychology is going, is the demonization that society has created of white young men as an effect for trying to normalize the beautiful panacea of different identities.
Hold on, panacea. I gotta look up that word.
Write that down.
Yeah, panacea.
So think about this, Sisto. White young men. When you look at these shooters, So then all of a sudden they're being told that they are wrong. Like this is not racial doctrine. We look at society and we see this juxtaposition, right? The celebration of things that are so important. We need to celebrate different races and different cultures and different diversities, but we cannot celebrate differences at the expense and belittling of another. It is not a either or. It is and. It is the inclusion of all. And the problem our society has gotten into is we have become demonizing towards white men in a society where we need to celebrate white men alongside black men and Hispanic women and Asian women and so forth and so forth, and transgendered individuals. Like, Sisto, that's the starting point. Would you agree?
I mean, and what you're basically saying, Eddie, is that we need to celebrate humanity, right? We need to celebrate. We need to celebrate everybody and all their differences, but we also, in those differences, we need to recognize that there are certain things in each of those communities in the mental health sphere that affect only them, right?
Yep.
I mean, for years and years and years, and one of the biggest things is, and I know that folks are going to think, well, here's two guys talking about this, and of course they're going to talk about men, but people don't realize that men have a higher risk of suicide than women by more than 3 times, because there is a perspective in society that men shouldn't have emotions, that men should not seek help when there's something going on inside of them, right? And I can tell you from experience, I grew up in a household with a mother who was manic depressive and bipolar. And not funny, but I mean, it's horrible. But at the same time, one of the things that a lot of people always tell me is Sisto, you're just so attentive to certain things. Like, you notice certain things. And I always have to tell them, that's not me being attentive. That's a trauma response, right?
Yeah.
It's a trauma response from being around somebody whose emotions, if I'm not paying attention and being emotionally aware of other people's emotions around me, it could go bad, right? Then they have an episode. And being around somebody in that space and having to grow up with it and being young, I remember being 10, 11 years old and seeing my mom have her first episode and not understanding why is mom sick. She doesn't look sick. She doesn't look like there's anything wrong, but there are indicators, right? So I lived from the time I was 10 to the time I was 19, making sure that I was watching my mom for her not to be sick, right? And there was a time where when I went to college and I was at college and I left home, she had another episode and I wasn't there. Because you have to pay attention to these things. You have to understand, and society needs to understand when somebody's acting a little bit different. Don't think that they're just purposefully changing their lives. Start asking questions.
Yep.
I hear what you're saying about that, and don't be afraid to understand that you don't have the tools. You don't have the tools to help some of these folks. You can't just, I had a friend when my mom had passed away, and I was telling him about my mom dying and everything else, and he says to me, he turns to me and he says, "Oh, come on, dude, there's a pill for that." That was the answer. And it's dismissive and it's horrible, but you think about it on a broader scale, Eddie. You think about it in the context of what we're dealing with this young person who actually had an issue, had a breakdown, and went out and acted on that. And what he perceived.
So let's pull that thread.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, let's pull that thread. And I'm gonna push back on you. I do think every single one of us has a tool, a very simple tool. But let's say an individual, we've identified this population that tends to inflict these awful things, right? We can go through all the different murders, all the different killings, the attempted assassinations. I mean, all this stuff, right? There's similarities to a lot of this. But then you introduce something that you hit the nail on the head on. Howard Stern, the original. He's the OG of shock doctrine. He's the OG. He did things that were so ridiculous, so extreme, and so like drastic in a way that it affects the brain, right? You know, I don't know if you remember the story about who's the girl that was what you talking about, Willis? That TV show?
Oh, you're talking about Dana Plato?
Dana Plato, right? And she went on the show, and he just absolutely was awful to her, and she left that show and committed suicide, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Howard Stern started the normalization of extreme talk that preyed. It's a predatory act upon individuals in society that are starving for identity, that are starving for connection, and if they don't feel it, they find their identity in the dehumanization or the the minimization of another person, right? And so now you have these young individuals, mostly young white men, who are now hearing so much dehumanizing of the other, of other things, of other people. They are being beaten up in a certain angle, and then they're hearing other people talk and disparage others, right? So now all of a sudden their brain is filled with this sense of value and self-worth, that dopamine experience. They want more of it. So then what do? They go to social media, Sisto. And social media has this, every social media outlet has this, and it's called an algorithm.
Yeah.
And that algorithm is a formula that feeds you what you want to hear, Sisto.
Yeah.
We all have it.
Yeah.
It feeds you, force feeds you the information, whether it's false, made up, a bot from China or Russia, right? All this stuff on Charlie Kirk and all this stuff saying that Israel killed Charlie Kirk. They found it came from Russia and China, these fake bots trying to perpetuate an anti-Israel sentiment in America. Like, there's an intentionality about this stuff, and it's this closed loop. So now you have a young man who's feeling ostracized from society.
Yep.
Who has now created some sort of manic episode in their brain.
Yep.
That's filled with this anger towards the other.
Yep.
And then a closed loop that cycles and cycles and cycles and makes them more and more angry. This happens to all of us.
Yeah.
That's what social media is doing to us.
Well, and I mean,
Sisto.
and you're talking, and it's so funny because, a year ago, you encouraged me to get on TikTok. Okay. I've only been on TikTok for a year.
Yeah, but TikTok is the best platform, and here's why. They actually work to control these algorithms. They push back children protection.
They do. But I'm going to tell you what I've learned about the algorithm to this point, okay?
Okay.
On my TikTok, you go to my TikTok, and it's just a guy walking around. That's my little hashtag. That's my little thing. And I do little videos, vignettes of me walking around town in Albuquerque and everything else. But also, probably the last 4 months, because of this platform, people have been encouraging me to go live and just talk so that I have more of an opportunity to engage people on the platform. And I'm learning about influencers, how they're making their money and what they do and everything else. But what I wanted to do in that space was I wanted to create a space where people could come and find answers, find solutions to their problems. And I started with that premise in my mind, not thinking that the algorithm would actually pick that up, right? And what has happened is there's been this community that I've built around myself on TikTok with a group of individuals who all have this sense of community to protect each other, to lift each other up, to hold each other when they need to be held. And the funny part is the number one group of people that I draw from is in Utah. And I laugh because, they were a few miles from where this incident happened, and we were reaching out to them. How are you guys doing? How are you feeling? Were you there? And they weren't there, but didn't mean that trauma of that incident in that community didn't hit them in a way, and giving them resources to go and say, okay, if you need to talk to somebody, go, here's some resources that you can reach out to certain folks. I like to watch a lot of the uplifting, more inspirational type of stuff on TikTok. And one of the things that I always came across from and just being, somebody who was around mental illness and people who are struggling, no matter what it may. And you may not have a mental illness, you may just have a bad day, right? And one of my favorite things to tell people is that if you're having a bad day and you don't know who to call me. Just shoot me a text and ask me, hey, do you have a minute? And I'm always happy to give people that minute to do a check-in, do a self-check and say, hey, man, what you're feeling is valid. What's happening to you is real. But at the same time, let's see if we can get you some additional help and going back to your point, and I really kind of get to it, is that you had said that that we don't have all the tools, right? So what's the number one tool that you think that everybody has to...
You just said it. You just said it, Sisto. Human connection.
Yeah.
What everyone is striving for, what everyone is needing. Like the science behind a literal hug or touch on the arm that is created in the brain. I mean, it's incredible what happens in our body. When you go up and you give a hug to someone, and that exchange of chemicals that floods the brain with a sense of relief, a sense of connection and hope.
Yep.
Oftentimes people say, well, Eddie, I struggle with too much cortisol, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's anxiety or depression, right? Well, what are the tools? Well, one, you need to be with someone and you need to laugh.
Yeah.
You need to laugh where you're crying, right? Scientists have talked about the fact that this cortisol that overwhelms your brain, that makes you so manic or depressed, that if you can get it out through your tears, right? Think about how close that connection is to your eyes. And that this cortisol can get purged from your body in a positive way.
Yeah.
But doing it through laughter or sharing in a moment of human connection, that is the most important tool, right? I was a former counselor for many, many years. I was paid to connect with others. But it is a simple tool that we all have of sitting down, maybe holding someone's hand and being in their moment.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is, loving someone is the notion of sacrificing what you are wanting and being 100% in their moment.
Yeah.
That means so much to me.
Yeah.
As a parent who there's things I don't want to do sometimes that my kids want to do, but I love them and I want to be in their moment.
Yeah.
So I think that is incredibly powerful for all of us. And, and if we go back, you're talking about Utah. I want to bring up the whole problem that we see in this political dynamic where individuals are trying to justify what has happened, right? Sisto, you and I have seen it. Democrats have brought up and said, oh, he deserved it because he incited this type of rhetoric.
Yeah.
Right? What a disgusting statement for someone to make. And honestly, man, I see it. These are my colleagues, people that I know, associations.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to call them friends because it's really sad to see what they're saying.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have pushed back at me. And I said, you know what, at the bare minimum, the fact that my 9-year-old child came up to me and talked about a video that their friends have seen online of a person being assassinated in the public square. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
How horrible has our society gotten
and
to where that is readily available and 9-year-olds are talking about watching that?
And the funny part with all that too is that there's people who, I was talking with our producer Mandy about this and she's like, have you seen it? And I'm like, no, because I did not actively seek it out. I did not actively want to see this. I did not want to. I had so much initial trauma when I was younger watching Kennedy get assassinated. And that was years before I was even born. The
Thank
slowdown.
you, Oliver Stone, for that.
Yeah, the slowdown, the rewind, the slowdown, the rewind. You remember that? And
it's the Puda film.
Yeah. And so with that being a case is that then you're exactly right. And it wasn't just friends. It was family. I mean, I had a family member come at me on one of my social media platforms, and I had to. And two things happened in that discussion. One, I told everybody in my feed, do not engage in this conversation. This is a family thing now, right? Okay. And two, growing up in my household, the one thing that people always used to say is you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about money. Okay. 2 out of those 3, my family had no problem ever talking about at the table, right? Because they wanted us to be engaged. And in that, though, is that everybody, not everybody in my family is a Democrat. Not everybody in my family is a Republican. Not everybody in my family is an independent. Not everybody in my family votes. But they all have thoughts and ideas of their own that they bring to the table that are real. And a lot of the times it's so funny. Every Thanksgiving in my family, my core of my family, we sit down, we have dinner, and all my family wants to come and do and talk to me about is politics. Why? Because they know that's my job. They know that's what I do. They know that have a read on all of this stuff. But at the same time, I just want to watch the football game.
Yeah,
I just want to get my turkey and my dough and my tryptophan and take a nap. That's what I'm looking for. Right? But at the end of the day, even in those spaces, right? Those familial spaces, my family's coming to me and saying, "Sisto, what about this? Sisto, what about that?" I know that I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility to provide them with the best information that I have at the moment, and not come from a space of this is the full authority. It's also then, it takes a lot for people to stand up and say what they believe in, even if it's not what others around you believe in, right? And I constantly have been criticized by the left in our party. I think you have too, of them saying to me, you're not a real Democrat. You're a dino. And I have friends who are rhinos, rhinos in name only, dinos in name only. And, and I'll never forget this. There was a elected official a few years back who came up to me, and he said one of the local bloggers here in New Mexico had said to me, had put in his blog, "Sisto bait the progressive consultant," right? And this legislator felt incumbent upon himself to approach me and tell me, "Sisto, I saw that in the blog and I laughed because there's nothing progressive about you."
Oh my gosh.
And I said to this elected official, I said, "So tell me, since you understand what progressivism is and you understand me as a person, please tell me what about me is not progressive." And he said, "Well, it's only because you support moderate candidates." And I said, "So my candidates have those opinions, not me." Unlike what I've seen with other progressive consultants do in this town, is they will find a candidate and make them a progressive and then get them elected, and then you find out there's nothing progressive about them at all. Whereas the accountability, the responsibility that I come to the table as a consultant and a political consultant, and I've told this to every single client that I've had, I am not here to change your mind about what you want to talk about. I am here to help you get your message out and make it align with voters that is going to be relevant to them and where they're at and where you want to go. So that at no time did I ever misrepresent you to the public, right? And that's accountability, Eddie. And I don't have to do that. We don't have to do that in what we do. But at the same time, that same amount of accountability, I don't post a lot. I can't tell you how many times in the early days of the internet where something would come across my feed and I'd be like, I want to talk about this. This is interesting. I want to put this out there, right? And I put it out there and I find out it's fake. And I'm like, oh, dang, I got to get that down. Sorry, that's a lie. But that's where we have to have, one, we've got to have the responsibility to do the right thing, hold ourselves accountable. And then we've got to also have a little bit of civil courage to get this thing done, right?
Yeah.
And and to be better with each other and to have these conversations with one another and to get everybody to a different place. So
and to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is the thing. Like, I mean, Sisto, we have hit a point in the world where we have become our ideas, right? That you walk around and people have fortified their identity in who they are based on what they believe. And that is a scary proposition. And our responsibility is to say, hold up, none of us knows everything. None of us have it figured out.
Yeah.
We all have our health concerns, our mental health concerns, our financial concerns, our familial concerns, our relational concerns, our spiritual concerns. We're all on a path and a journey to try to figure this out together. And the moment someone acts and thinks like they have something figured out and achieved, that's when you know you're in trouble. Now, listen, we're not going to get into Charlie Kirk stuff, but the guy actually did something very unique, right? Regardless of what his perspective was and ideas were, he engaged in conversations and said, you know what? I want to hear from you. You give me data and information and have me rethink my position. And I'm going to give you data and information and have you rethink your position. And let's tearing that down to the basic bones, that's amazing. That's what we all should be doing.
Well, and
respectfully sitting together and hearing from each other and integrating that into who we are.
Yeah, but I mean, even in that process, right? I mean, I understand that, he did do exactly what you said he did, but part of it was scripted, right? I mean, part of it was for the Shock-jock component of it.
Do a lot of Shock-jock. Yeah,
what he did was he here you have an ultra right conservative going on to college campuses, the bastions of liberalism, right? According to the president and a number of other individuals, right? And saying, I'm here, bring it on. Let's see if you can debate and prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Right. But in that process, I was like, okay, so do people just walk up to the mic and he just asks them questions? Because I didn't go to a Charlie Kirk event. I never did anything remotely a Charlie Kirk event. But I was asking our producer, Mandy, I said, but did Charlie Kirk ever invite, I don't know, Rachel Maddow to sit across from him? Did Charlie Kirk ever invite the other people who have that same political integrity? And that's why, and Eddie, it's so funny. That's why we call ourselves Cactus Crossfire, because we remember the old show Crossfire, and there was the two leading political minds from both parties sitting on either side of each other, going back and forth, point for point. Debate, conversation, and that's why we came to this platform with the same intent and intention. And it's
but life's changed since then, Sisto, and that's something that's important. It's funny you brought up Rachel Maddow. I wouldn't put her in the category of I have my own opinions about her. She's certainly from the left, but she is a shock doctrine. She's shock doctrine as well. So maybe she fits Charlie Kirk's dynamic, right? But back in the day when you had true thinkers, I mean, like the Greenspans and Carvilles and just really Begalas of the world that sat and talked humanely with each other and talked about theory, right? And talked about the policies and not counter denunciation. Our world has gotten to a point where we talk about something, and in order to prove something incorrect, we have to counter denunciate the individual in who they are because what they're presenting. Because an idea in itself cannot be true if the person who expresses the idea is filled with flaw. True. And that's bull crap. I mean, come on. Every single one of us is filled with flaw. But an idea, a theory, can have substance apart from the human vessel that shares that concept. But in all of the discourse that we see in society, it has gotten to that point. That feeds back to the closed loop cycle of what we see in this world, where you're only seeing what you have programmed your algorithm to see, right? The Greta Thunbergs of the world who has, who criticizes anyone who else that says there is no global warming, has her own internal closed loop of the sky is falling, the world is melting, right? Sea levels are raising, and that's all she experiences.
Yeah.
Because she is in a closed loop that reinforces her theory.
And and the funny thing is like, it's the fact that we've created this environment where anybody can become a talking head, and be seen as a authority. We don't have the civil the debates that we used to. We don't have the Gore Vidal, William F. Buckley debates like we used to have. Right now, those were two, philosophical giants on either end of the spectrum. Right.
Pillars.
And those are the types of things we don't see anymore. We don't see that anymore. And I always laugh because, when you work as closely with elected officials and our legislators and governors and members of Congress, in not all cases, but in some, there are spaces where they come together and they're like, ugh. And Eddie, you probably know this better than anybody else. When the doors close and nobody else is watching, and like, look, dude, I really hate this bill just as much as you do, but I got to vote for it or these guys are going to come after me. Right?
Yep.
And
political survival.
And it's political survival. And they've all done it. Everybody's done it at some point or another. Right? And the guys that I've respected the most over time are the guys who are constantly working to bring both sides to the table and have a semblance of a voice. And we talked about this at the very top of our shows here, in our very first episodes. Here in New Mexico, we got two of those giants. We've got in our state Senate, you've got Peter Wirth, who is a Santa Fe Democrat, and then you have Bill Scherer, who is a San Juan Farmington Red Republican. And these two guys this last legislative session worked together, even though they didn't agree on a lot of the stuff, but it was always civil on that floor. It never got out of control. And Scherer, my good friend Senator Scherer, I love him to death. He's the nicest man you'll ever meet. I don't agree with everything that he does, but he's a great human being, and I can respect him as a human being. I can see his humanity. One of the things that we share is he's Catholic, I'm Catholic, and we talk about our faith a lot, he and I. And one of the things that folks automatically, they're like, oh, Sisto's Catholic? He must be, pro-life. He must be. No, I'm not. I'm pro-choice, but at the same time, doesn't mean I can't sit across the table and talk to the guy, right? I can't have a conversation. I can't be civil with him. And I guarantee you, folks, I've talked to so many elected officials. I won't go talk to him. Why not? Why wouldn't you have that conversation with him? Find out what makes him think, because I bet you guys can find a middle ground. And he and Senator Wirth, and it's funny that we're talking about the two of them, this last legislative session sponsored a bill to help fix mental health in New Mexico. Yeah. The two opposing sides came together on an issue to try that and recognize that this was a real problem and try to come up with a solution. So, we've got
Sisto,
people.
you hit the nail on the head. Let's go back to it. Don't be a closed algorithm.
Yeah.
Right? Talk to the other side. Talk to each other. Right?
Yeah.
Be an open source algorithm that allows your social media feed and ask about both sides.
Yeah.
Look at both sides. Talk to both sides. Right? I mean, this is such an important point. And what you just described is what our society needs more of.
Well,
so thank you for sharing that.
And I think that a lot of folks, that are watching this now that may not be as engaged, we know that a lot of them are the hyper political and that are engaged and are watching this. Yeah. But one of the challenges I have for them is, is that they need to think outside this circle that we have. Think, and you're exactly right. Think outside the algorithm. Talk to somebody at a gas station. Ask them how the weather is. How's your day been? How are your kids doing? Do you have any kids? Are they going to college? What are you thinking about college affordability? What do you think about, you have toddlers? The governor just, in New Mexico, just gave universal child care to everybody. What do you think about that? We
got to save that for another episode.
But we're going to save all of that for another episode. But at the same time, our listeners have to engage not just within the political class, because we all sometimes get a big head and we think we know it all. And what makes me one of the most effective consultants in New Mexico, I stay connected to the people that we're trying to reach. I mean, those are my friends. Those are my family. Those are people that I'll call them up and I'm like, hey, did you hear about this? No. I had a friend, she's got a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. Called her the other day and I said, hey, you can actually get childcare now. And she's like, what? And she's like, I make too much money. I said, nope, it's universal now. But anyways, so thanks everybody for tuning in. But before we go, we have to do our hot takes, our tri-takes.
Hot takes.
So,
spicy,
Eddie.
prickly, quickly.
Yep.
My spicy thing is we need to have a true conversation with our unions about retirement. Retirement costs are becoming so increasingly high and difficult to sustain. And I know it matters to our union brothers and sisters to make sure that they have a long-term investment portfolio that takes care of them and their families. But the retirement proposition in public sectors is tearing down our ability to balance budgets across the nation. And so there needs to be an honest conversation. Again, that's a challenge. I know it's spicy and some of y'all don't want to hear it, but I'm not saying get rid of retirement. It's how we do retirements. We need a different way. We need a much more realistic way. Okay, something prickly. Here's my prickly take of the week. Representative Omar from Minnesota, you should be ashamed of yourself. She went live on camera and was smiling, talking about the death of Charlie Kirk. Are you freaking kidding me? You are a representative in Congress, and that is your type of behavior. I think you owe the community an apology, and you need to look internally, get outside of your closed algorithm loop, and think that that's how the world is. Don't smile, don't laugh, don't mock someone's death. And my quickly thing of the day is that Caitlin Clark went on season-ending IR, and I am no longer interested in WNBA basketball.
That's a quickly one. So spicy, my spice doesn't change that much here in New Mexico. We're coming up on a special session, October 1st. It was announced by the governor. We're going to be focusing in on a lot of the stuff that we talked about here today: mental health, healthcare, some gaps in the federal budget. So be on the lookout for all of that. Something quickly is that early and absentee voting is about to begin in a couple of in about a month. Actually, about 2 weeks from when we air this. Everybody, make sure that you find your polling locations, have a plan, get ready to go vote. And quickly...
Prickly.
Oh, prickly.
Just get prickly.
The prickly part is always tough, but the prickly part is this, and it's along the similar lines of you guys. My Republican friends who are out there, in regards to this whole entire discourse, let's be mindful that this isn't the only shooting that has happened. Let's be mindful that you guys need to start talking about the school shootings as well. You need to be talking about the church shootings as well. You need to be talking about those folks as well. You cannot have gun control and you cannot have gun liberty without having a conversation about what's happening with guns. That's it. End of story. So, if they're not going to take the bait and they're not going to go into the gun debate at all, then let's have that mental health discussion and let's get it on. I want to thank our producer, Mandy. I want to thank Gabe here at 8688 Studios. We're out, and everybody, we'll see you next time.
See ya.